He was found peacefully in his armchair, a quiet stillness filling the room. No outward signs of distress, no cry for help. Just the soft glow of the television, his robe slightly ajar, and an undeniable emptiness, the kind that lingers after something irreversible. The official report cited natural causes. But for those of us who understand the subtle cues, it was a different story: a silent, hormonal decline, a gradual fading of a man's vitality. Not from a sudden illness, but from a quiet neglect. And sadly, his story isn't unique. Every year, countless older men experience a similar descent: a loss of strength, diminished sexual function, a clouding of emotional clarity. All while mistakenly believing they were doing the right thing by letting go of what they perceive as no longer necessary. For decades, men have been told to avoid self-pleasure, often labeled as childish, shameful, or simply redundant. But after the age of 60, this ingrained belief can, paradoxically, become incredibly detrimental. Here's a truth rarely spoken: when you see self-stimulation in your later years, your body doesn't merely pause. It begins a subtle, yet significant, deterioration. Your prostate can become stagnant, your testosterone levels may plummet, and your emotional resilience can weaken. By the time these effects become noticeable, you're already years behind. I'm Dr. David Reed, a board-certified urologist and specialist in men's health, with over 3 decades of experience guiding aging men towards renewed vitality, self-assurance, and an improved quality of life. I've had countless conversations with men from all walks of life: farmers, veterans, teachers, grandfathers, all of whom genuinely believed they were making the right choice by abstaining. And I've witnessed the quiet regret in their eyes as the consequences finally surfaced. Most were completely unaware that habits formed decades ago, habits society often stigmatized, were now silently undermining their well-being during the most crucial years of their lives. But there is good news. In this video, exclusively for the Senior Health 365 channel, I'm going to outline 4 significant health consequences that can arise when older men stop self-stimulation. More importantly, I'll provide practical, medically sound strategies to prevent them before it's too late. These are straightforward solutions that thousands of my patients have successfully used to safeguard their sexual health, restore their energy, and avoid common issues often dismissed as just getting old. And please, stay until the very end. The final consequence I'll discuss is one that even many medical professionals hesitate to address, yet it could quietly triple your risk of certain prostate complications if ignored. If you prioritize protecting your body, your confidence, and your independence as you age, you'll want to hear this. If you're watching now, type 1 in the comments if you're open to this discussion, or 0 if you're skeptical. I welcome all perspectives, because this is a conversation older men deserve to have openly, honestly, and with real answers. Let's begin with the first, and perhaps most dangerously overlooked, consequence of discontinuing self-pleasure in older age. I've witnessed it countless times. A man in his late 60s or early 70s walks into my office, perplexed and frustrated. He reports a complete absence of spontaneous erections for months, sometimes even over a year. What truly unsettles him isn't just the lack of function, but the abruptness of it all. One day, he felt like himself. The next, something within him simply ceased to operate. This sudden shift often catches men off guard because no one ever explained that ceasing sexual activity could cause their sexual function to diminish, much like an unused muscle. Let me state this clearly: your penis is not merely a decorative organ. It's a functional organ that requires consistent blood circulation to maintain its health. When you experience extended periods without any stimulation, particularly after age 60, a problematic process begins. Blood flow slows, oxygen delivery decreases, and the tissues can start to stiffen, not in a beneficial way, but in a manner that can lead to fibrosis, nerve damage, and an irreversible loss of erectile capacity. This isn't just theory, it's fundamental vascular biology. Consider it this way: if you completely immobilized your legs for 6 months, what would happen? You'd lose muscle coordination, flexibility, perhaps even your ability to walk. The same principle applies to the penis after a certain age. It doesn't just go into standby mode, it begins to shut down when not regularly used. And the most insidious part is that this decline offers no loud warning. It's a silent, creeping process. You don't notice it until it's too late. One day, your morning erections are gone. Then, even physical touch or vivid fantasies elicit no response. Eventually, even with medication, the body no longer responds as it once did, because its fundamental structure has already eroded. I've had men sit across from me, eyes welling up, asking if it's possible to regain what they've lost. Some do, with intensive therapy, significant lifestyle adjustments, and dedicated medical support. But others, they waited too long. They believed that abandoning self-pleasure was harmless, a sign of self-control. In reality, it was the quiet beginning of functional deterioration. And let me be absolutely clear, this isn't about an obsession with sexual activity. It's about protecting a vital component of your circulatory system, your hormonal regulation, and your sense of masculine identity. Maintaining occasional solo activity, even just once or twice a week, can sustain blood flow, keep nerves active, and signal to your body that this function remains important. The truth is, what you don't use, you gradually lose. And in older age, that loss can be permanent. I've seen it devastate men, not because they're striving to impress anyone, but because it profoundly impacts their self-esteem, their relationships, and their very sense of self. What makes this truly tragic is that it was entirely preventable. All it required was consistency, not indulgence, but mindful attention. While most men fear the loss of erections, they often don't realize that this is just the beginning. The next consequence of ceasing self-stimulation affects something even more fundamental: your hormones. And once they begin to falter, the ripple effects extend far beyond the bedroom. Let me illustrate how this typically unfolds. It usually starts subtly. A man no longer feels quite like himself, but he can't articulate why. He's less enthusiastic about getting out of bed, his usual walks are skipped, his appetite shifts, and his mood becomes flatter. He feels more fatigued during the day, more irritable, more withdrawn. Deep down, he senses something important slipping away, but he can't pinpoint it. In my clinic, I've seen men attribute these changes to aging, stress, or poor sleep. But upon closer examination, we frequently uncover the same underlying issue: their testosterone levels have dropped. Not merely the natural decline associated with age, but an accelerated drop due to the complete absence of sexual stimulation. And here is something most people never hear: self-stimulation is one of the few non-pharmaceutical methods older men can use to encourage natural testosterone production. It's not about the act itself or fantasy, it's about the underlying biology. When you engage in regular arousal and release, your brain transmits signals that help regulate your hormonal rhythm. Dopamine levels increase, the hypothalamus becomes active, and even your testicles, well into your 60s or 70s, receive the message to continue producing testosterone. But when you halt this process entirely, go in weeks or months without any sexual activity, your body receives the opposite message. It interprets that intimacy is no longer required, so it reduces hormone production. Once this cycle begins, it can be challenging to reverse. Men with low testosterone don't just feel tired. They can begin to lose their sense of identity. They struggle to focus, lose interest in activities that once brought them pride. Their muscles can weaken, their bones become more fragile, and they become more susceptible to depression. Perhaps most critically, their cardiovascular risk increases, elevating their vulnerability to heart attacks and strokes. I've witnessed once vibrant men become mere shadows of their former selves within a few short years. Not due to severe illness, but because no one ever informed them how crucial regular healthy sexual stimulation is for maintaining hormonal balance. One patient of mine, a retired firefighter, confided in me that after his hormone levels plummeted, he started feeling as though he no longer mattered. His words still resonate with me: "Doc, I don't even recognize the man in the mirror," and I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't vanity, it was profound grief. This situation didn't have to occur. With a little education and the maintenance of a simple habit he mistakenly believed was wrong, he could have preserved not just his hormones, but his happiness, his energy, his drive. Because here's the stark reality: once your testosterone crashes in older age, it can require years of therapy and significant financial investment to recover, if it recovers at all. But with consistent, respectful engagement in your own intimacy, you can maintain your hormonal health for longer than most people imagine possible. While hormonal changes are often imperceptible, the next consequence is something every man feels in a much more physical, sometimes painful way, a condition that develops quietly within the body until it begins to interfere with daily life, and most men don't even realize it as linked to one simple activity they've ceased doing. Allow me to explain. There's a particular kind of discomfort that older men rarely discuss: a deep, dull ache in the pelvis, a strange pressure after prolonged sitting, or a persistent urge to urinate even when the bladder isn't full. It doesn't appear suddenly like a heart attack. It builds slowly, silently, until it starts to disrupt daily routines. By the time most men mention it to their doctor, they've often been enduring it for months, sometimes years. What's truly surprising is how frequently this silent suffering can be traced back to one overlooked cause: prostate congestion, resulting from a lack of ejaculation. Your prostate is not a passive organ in the male body. It's an active gland that produces and stores seminal fluid. That fluid is designed to move, to be expelled. When you cease self-stimulation or sexual activity entirely, particularly in your later years, that fluid accumulates. And when it stagnates, it can thicken, pressure builds, and inflammation can set in. That's when you start noticing changes: a slower urine flow, discomfort in your lower back, that constant urge to go, the feeling that wakes you in the middle of the night. As a urologist, I cannot overstate how many older patients come in convinced they have a bladder problem, only to discover they're dealing with an irritated, inflamed prostate. In many instances, the solution isn't medication, it's movement. It's the body's natural cleansing process through regular ejaculation. When this process is ignored for too long, the consequences can be severe. Some men develop chronic prostatitis, a painful, long-term inflammation that is both difficult to treat and challenging to live with. Others find themselves needing invasive procedures just to feel normal again. Beyond the physical discomfort, there's another layer of risk that most men never hear about. Research, including a widely recognized Harvard study, has indicated that regular ejaculation may help reduce the risk of prostate cancer. The theory is straightforward: when the prostate is regularly emptied, it may reduce the buildup of potentially harmful substances. However, when that fluid is allowed to stagnate for months on end, it could contribute to increased inflammation and a higher long-term risk. One man I treated had gone almost 2 years without any sexual activity. He told me he simply didn't feel the need, believing that part of his life was behind him. But when his PSA levels spiked and further tests were conducted, we discovered significant congestion. His prostate was swollen and irritated, and he was facing biopsy discussions that could have been avoided with something as simple and natural as maintaining occasional release. This isn't about promoting excessive indulgence, it's about preventing suffering. It's about understanding that the male body doesn't suddenly cease requiring care after 60. If anything, it demands more attention, more respect. The prostate is one of the most vulnerable organs in older men, and when neglected, the damage isn't just uncomfortable, it can be life-altering. But while a congested prostate might cause pain, irritation, and restless nights spent going to the bathroom, the final consequence strikes even deeper. It attacks the very core of how a man perceives himself, and for many, it's the one they never anticipate until it has already taken hold. Let me illustrate what I mean. It's the quietest decline of all, and often the most devastating. It doesn't register on blood tests, it's not something easily quantifiable. But you feel it profoundly: a slow extinguishing of the spark you once possessed, a creeping sense of detachment, an inexplicable distance from yourself. It happens incrementally. You stop self-stimulating because you believe it's no longer necessary. You convince yourself it's merely age, a lack of interest, or simply the way life unfolds when you're not in a relationship. But over time, that decision doesn't just affect your physical body, it permeates your mind, your emotions, your very essence of being alive. I've spoken with men who describe feeling an emptiness within, not due to illness or pain, but because they've gone months, sometimes years, without any form of release, without any intimacy, even with themselves. And gradually, they begin to feel unseen and wanted, inconsequential. They don't discuss it. Of course, most older men were never taught how. But it manifests in their posture, in their avoidance of mirrors, in the way their voices grow softer when asked about their well-being. This isn't about sexual activity, it's about vitality, about the subtle yet powerful connection between your physical body and your emotional state. When you completely abandon self-pleasure, you sever one of the last remaining pathways to joy, to self-recognition, to feeling fundamentally human. And for men over 60, that's not merely a loss, it's a wound. Because arousal, pleasure, and release aren't exclusive to youth. They are integral to keeping your brain engaged, your hormones balanced, and your emotions healthy. Neurologically, the chemicals released during self-stimulation, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, are crucial for mood regulation, anxiety reduction, and the reinforcement of emotional stability. Without them, men are more prone to experiencing depression, loneliness, and even cognitive decline. But here's the truth I want every man to hear. It's never too late to reclaim yourself. Never too late to reawaken the energy you thought was gone. And in the final part of this video for Senior Health 365, I'll show you exactly how the simple, science-backed steps you can take today to restore what so many older men have lost, and what you still have the power to protect. Let's conclude this together. There's a pervasive belief among many older men that intimacy, pleasure, and desire are things you simply outgrow. That after a certain age, your body is meant to become quiescent, and that it's perhaps noble, even respectable, to relinquish that part of yourself. But after over 3 decades as a doctor working with men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, I can tell you that belief is costing far too many men their health, their happiness, and their very identity. You've learned today how stopping self-stimulation can lead to the gradual breakdown of your sexual function, a perilous drop in your hormones, the swelling and inflammation of your prostate, and a silent emotional numbness that erodes your spirit day by day. These are not minor shifts. These are life-altering changes that occur not merely because of aging, but because of neglect. However, the good news is, it doesn't have to be this way. Your body still remembers how to feel. Your mind still longs for connection. And your health still relies on you honoring every part of yourself, even the parts no one else sees. This isn't about indulgence, it's about life. It's about preserving what makes you feel strong, whole, and human. You do not need to feel any shame for choosing health over silence. If this message resonated with you, I urge you to take it seriously, to take it personally, because it is personal. And if you're ready to regain control of this aspect of your life, know that I am with you. You are not alone, and you are far from finished. If this message stirred something within you, even just slightly, type 1 in the comments to let me know you're still engaged, that you still care, that you're still striving for your health. And if it didn't, that's perfectly fine too. Type 0 and tell me what you need. Either way, your voice matters, and you are not alone.